This is Dr. Syed Hyder. Welcome to the Dr. Hyder Show. So we should be having Dr. James Thorpe joining us at any moment now. And until he does, and I don't know, he was running late I think, with clinic. So until he does join, I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the questions that we got from earlier live streams. So one of the questions was, is the presence of the spike protein always correlated with long haul symptoms, or can you have the protein present and have no symptoms? So you can have the protein present and have no symptoms. And so the protein generally causes inflammation. When you have spike protein present in your monocytes, it triggers inflammation, but inflammation doesn't always necessarily cause symptoms. And so I liken it to people who have high cholesterol or who have high blood pressure. You know, these things we know cause damage to the body, or high blood sugar, right? Like diabetes, or maybe not full blown diabetes, but elevated blood sugar, pre-diabetes. These things are damaging to the body. They can, you know, the chronic inflammation that they cause can cause disease over the long term. So once disease is actually evident, then you do have symptoms. But you know, all the way, you know, up until the point where a disease is diagnosed, when there are evident symptoms, you do have ongoing damage happening. It's just silent. So this is one of the reasons I think that it is important for maybe everyone, you know, at this point in time in the US and around the world. Um, you know, I think it would be really nice if everyone could get tested for the spike protein and the inflammation that it causes. And so, I hope the IncelDX, their test and their, you know, their methodology becomes more widespread and is available to more people, because you know it should be right up there along with testing for your blood pressure and your blood sugar, um, and other things like your cholesterol. You know, in today's world, since anyone could have been exposed to the spike protein, right? I mean, you could have even had an asymptomatic COVID infection, even if you weren't vaccinated, right? If you weren't injected, but if say you got infected and you may not even been aware of it, you could have been exposed to the spike protein. Your body could have held on to it, and you could have chronic inflammation. So I don't want to, you know, like alarm people too much, but it is a possibility, you know, and whether this becomes a source of serious long-term illness and you know in the next 10, 20 years in the world, we don't know, you know, because we haven't had those 10 or 20 years pass yet. So the next question is, let me see if I can pull up chat. um, let's see, I'm getting messages here. Dr. Thorpe says he's on, but I don't see him. Hold on a second. Yeah, I don't see him in the. Let me see if I can. Did I sent the new link, right? Can you try clicking on it and seeing if you can log in? I mean, if you click on the link, it should say like join live stream or something, and if it doesn't, then it's not the right link. Maybe I'm in the wrong link. No, it says May 5th, 5 p.m. For some reason, I don't. So here we go. Here's the chat. Yeah, I'm streaming live right now. I can see myself on YouTube. Yeah, I can hear myself talking. Okay, thanks. All right, so sorry about that. We are trying to get Dr. Thorpe on the link, and trying to get him the correct link. Let me see if I can just find the link for him. We might set up a new stream. Let me see. Hope to join, and if not, I might need to end this stream and start a new one. The second question was, can vaccine injuries snowball over the months until severe lung damage and sepsis occurs? Wondering because I know of someone in the hospital where 5 different doctors have no idea what caused the pneumonia. We may have answered this during one of the live streams, but I don't think, I mean, just to answer it again, I don't think that sepsis would occur with a vaccine injury. Sepsis is basically an infection that's usually bloodborne. So septicemia and sepsis is kind of the response to infection usually. And so there's certain signs of it in the body. Severe lung damage, yes, I think that could occur with a vaccine injury, and it could theoretically get worse. And 5 doctors in the hospital having no idea what caused the pneumonia. So it can either, pneumonia is typically an infection, pneumonitis is an inflammation in the lungs. So sometimes it's not always clear which one it is, whether the person, they could have an inflammation in the lungs that looks kind of like pneumonia, and you may not be able to figure out what's causing it. And in that case, you might do a bronchoscopy, bronchoalveolar lavage, try to get some fluid out of the lungs, send it for testing. And sometimes, unfortunately, we are, I've worked in hospitals, and sometimes you're just not sure what's going on. But yes, to answer the question, I think basically, yes, a vaccine injury may be what's going on here. It's possible. And it could also be long COVID. It could be both. It could be a new COVID infection. It could be something else, it could be something entirely different. Some people, it's not super common, but here I think we have Dr. Thorpe joining now. Let me see if I can get him added. Dr. Thorpe, can you hear me? I can't see I can see your keyboard now. Let me see if I can add you. Yep, there we go. All right. Welcome, Dr. Thorpe. Can you hear me?
Dr. Hyder, I can hear you and I can see you.
Okay, great. I'm glad we got that figured out. Sorry about the confusion there with the 2 links, and one of them.
No problem. My fault. Good to see you
Yeah,
again.
we spoke recently, and it's glad to have you on my show now. So I remember I was interviewing you, which there was a different show. It wasn't my show, right?
I just remember your handsome, young, brilliant mind and face. I can't tell you what show it was on.
Great. So so basically tell us a little bit about yourself and where you've been, since the beginning of the pandemic. What's your history? You're an OBGYN, right? And you're practicing OBGYN, is that correct?
I am. I'm actually board certified in OBGYN, but I practice in my board subspecialty of maternal fetal medicine.
Okay.
And I've been doing that for a long, long time. My focus is on high risk OB. And that's what I do. And I'm 69 years old, and I continue to see 6,000 to 7,000 high risk pregnancy patients a year, and I love it. It's what God made me to do.
Wow. So I have a question. I've been thinking about what's going on. You've written about some of the issues that your patients and other people around the world have been having with vaccines and injuries. So I have a question for you. Do we, at this point, know for sure that vaccines are causing a problem, or could there be something else, right? So, for example, a lot of people may have been exposed to COVID, right? And so people have long COVID, people have problems from that. And some people may not even know that they had COVID. So the entire world has been exposed to 2 major things, in the last couple of years. One is COVID, and some people have been exposed to the vaccine. Some people have been exposed to both. So could there be, something else to explain the side effects people are reporting from the injections? So, for example, VAERS, right? You have people get an injection, and then in the next week or in the next few months, they might have a reaction, and some of them get reported to VAERS, some of them don't. So, could these be, as I guess the authorities say, like over-reporting? Could it be that people are just more aware of VAERS nowadays? Or do you think the data really points to the fact that they're kind of proves that this is a causal link to vaccines?
It's a causal link with the vaccine, undeniably. There's no over-reporting with VAERS. There's even more of an under-reporting with VAERS in the pandemic era because, Dr. Hyder, people like myself, even as bold as myself, are afraid of losing their careers by reporting to VAERS. So the under-reporting factor, people are talking about 40. Over the last 1986, what is that? Almost 30 years more. So traditionally, it's been in the range. The under-reporting factor has been anywhere from 1 to 5%. Okay, but there's no way that the under-reported factor is as low as that now. And the reason for that is there's several lines of evidence for that. First of all, nobody's patients or providers are not reporting to VAERS, number one. Number two, and I know that you're aware of this, the vast majority of reactions that occur to the vaccine do not, they actually, or I should say, let me state it more accurately. A lot of the concerning reactions to the vaccine occur within the first 2 weeks. And I think you're aware, because I believe we've discussed this before, that prior to this rollout of the vaccine is listed as not having a vaccine until you're 2 weeks out.
Right.
That's a matter of fact, and that was changed all over the world. So not only do we have a lot of missing cases from VAERS, and we have many other parallel databases that confirm VAERS. And let's talk about the most accurate of which is the Dmed Database, which you're familiar with. You're very familiar with it. The Dmed Database is all physician entry. All those physicians in the military, those are direct online access. They're all online access, so there's no hiding the fact. And I think you're aware of the whistleblowers. Dr. Teresa Long, who's in my neck of the woods up at Fort Rutgers, and many other brave physicians that have come forward and said, this is what's in the Dmed database, and it's exactly consistent with that, Dr. Hyder, of what you and I discussed before, and that is that it's consistent with VAERS. So the VAERS, we've always used it faithfully. It was never, ever designed to invoke causation. It was used as a pharmacovigilance tool. And now we've used it up until the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, oh no, it doesn't exist. It's of no value. No, that's not true. It's an extremely important pharmacovigilance tool. So if we look at that, but let's look at another third source. Let's look at Pfizer's own admission. And I've had this document for over a year, and I won't tell you where I got it from, and I will not tell you how I got it. But the last time we spoke, I told you that was accurate, and I believe that it was their data, and I believe it was an internal document that was leaked to me, and I couldn't prove that. Well, the proof is in the pudding. It's proof. The federal judge made them release it when they said they wouldn't release it for 75 years. That's interesting. 75 years, really. So the federal judge forced them to release it. And guess what? The document that you and I talked about a long time ago that I've had for a year is identical. There's not one dot or tittle or cross of a T. Even the artifact marks on the reproduction are the exact same as the one I had.
Wow.
So their own data within the first 12 weeks of rollout of December 1, 2020 to February 28th, 2021, they redacted the number, but there were a massive number of severe adverse effects, which we spoke about before. And they wouldn't give us the denominator, so we can't tell you what the kill rate of the vaccine is, but it composed 3.5% of the adverse events. And there are many, many very concerning aspects to that, their own admission. So there are 1,223 deaths, and that's just in the first 12 weeks of the rollout. Now, remember, they count the first 12 weeks of the rollout from December 1st, 2020, but really that's when the shipments were made. That doesn't mean that everybody that rolled it out got that on December 1st, 2020. No, some of that initial shipment might not have even been used for many months. So they redacted the number of how many they sent out and how many were administered purposefully. But also in that data is a cohort of pregnant women. And by the way, pregnant women were not supposed to receive this. There were no studies. There are no safety studies in pregnant women, zero. And this, in my area of expertise, and in what has in our 10 commandments that has law, is a moral law. And any obstetrician worth their weight in salt, we've always never, ever used a new drug or a new vaccine in pregnancy. Not even if it is approved, and it was never approved, you never use it until it's been out for a long time, because we know all about the disasters. We know that listen, I'm not proud of my specialty. We've had a lot of faux pas, very, very disastrous faux pas. And you know them all. Thalidomide was a horrible disaster. The Dalcon Shield was a horrible disaster. DES was a horrible disaster. I mean, these were horrible disasters. And this vaccine is absolutely contraindicated in pregnancy. The only pre-rollout studies were done in rats and mice, and only a few of them overseas, period. And they didn't even follow up the rats and the mice for a long time. So this is the most absurd, ridiculous cover-up and malpractice in my lifetime, if not in the entirety of medical history.
So I want to go back just briefly to the Dmed data. So the Department of Defense came out and said that, we had a glitch in our system, in the prior years, and that explains. And so how do you respond to that? Is there any way to know whether they're lying about that?
If their lips are moving, they're lying, Dr. Hyder.
Right.
I could never state it as succinctly as the attorney, Thomas Renz. Here you have the most sophisticated, reliable database in the entire world, in all of medicine. And Teresa Long and the rest of them blow the whistle from stuff that they've seen, just like me, what I've seen and witnessed and come out and spoke to you and many others. They knew what was going on. It was horrible. There were military pilots dropping dead. There were military pilots passing out. Military pilots that were taken off of flight status. There were pregnancy losses. There were miscarriages. There were malformations. There were fetal deaths. There were menstrual abnormalities, all consistent with what's in VAERS. So this is a huge stretch of one's imagination that, first of all, what's incredible is that these knuckleheads, Fauci and the rest of them, that they actually didn't think about that, and that they weren't monitoring the Dmed database for all these disasters. Why were they not? Why was it just after the whistle blow that they said, "Oh, we got to go back and this last 5 years we got to figure it out." Whenever you start lying and manipulating data like that, you just get yourself in more trouble, because now what they've done is they've lied, they've gone back and tried to fix things. Well, guess what? The law of unintended consequences is that they leave a trail, and that's what they've done. They're lying. They're lying through their teeth. It's not possible that the Dmed database, the most accurate database in the world, could, oh, it's been wrong for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
what's
God.
really ridiculous is that suggesting that our, young, healthy service members are that sick, right, at
Yes,
baseline, right? They're saying that that's the baseline, right?
right.
Where if you look at just the regular population, they're not even that sick, right? And that includes a bunch of obese elderly people, right? I mean, how can you argue that, 18, 19, 20, 30-year-olds, who are in the army, and trained to a certain level of physical fitness, have a level of illness that's beyond what you even see in the general
Yeah,
population. So
yeah.
I think it's like you're saying. I mean, it's just there's no way that you can say that this is that the last 5 years were actually as high as this year, right, or last
It's,
year.
that's exactly right. It's more obfuscation, lying. It's more collusion. It's illegal, fraudulent collusion, and it's a huge RICO violation. And there's attorney generals that are moving in that direction in various states. RICO violation is it's an acronym, RICO, racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations. This is what Judy Riani has done his whole life. This is a RICO violation of the greatest extent in the history, for sure, in the history of the United States, of also the world. So there's so much collusion. It's utterly atrocious. And we talked last time about the gag order, and the gag orders on every physician and nurse in the United States of America. And I'm doing my due diligence. And I have a team of truth seekers, and very brilliant truth seekers, including attorneys, truth seekers that have busted large multi-billion dollar corporations, mortgage companies, for fraud. And they know how to get documents, and they know how to get people wound up in their lies. I can state for the first time in public on your show, Dr. Hyder, that I have absolute proof that, and more details will follow, that every single licensure board and specialty board was offered $10 million or thereabouts of the coffers from HHS, Health and Human Services. Now, isn't that interesting? For COVID relief, wink, wink, nod, nod, also known as, what I would prefer more accurately to define it as, blood money, as bribery. Why would a not-for-profit American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology or American Board of Pediatrics, or your board, why would they need COVID relief funds? They don't. Okay, they're not taking care of patients. Now, what I want to be very clear here, I'm 100% certain of that, and I'll prove it to you. Not now, but it will be proven. Now, what I cannot tell you is, I cannot tell you for sure whether they took the money and applied for it. I do know for sure it was offered. I know that for sure because I have proof of it. But I cannot go to the American Board of OBGYN and demand them to tell me the truth. And FOIA can't do that either, because Freedom of Information Act is only for a government institution. But we will put FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request. It's not really a request, it's a law, as you saw with the federal judge with Pfizer, to ask them very specific questions. Okay, you offered these boards this much money, the licensure boards, the certification boards, of which, there's 200 plus of these separate independent entities. You offered this to them. Now, who took it? And who did you distribute the money to? Now, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say I know for 100% certain that they did take it, but I'd be shocked if they didn't, because that's the way they've treated me. They're scared to death of me. They're scared to death of me because they know I'm on the truth. And that's all they can do is respond with trying to destroy me and threaten my livelihood. The other reason that it's very strong corroborative evidence that they've taken the bribe money is it's pretty obvious. How do 200 plus different institutions, the American Board of yada, 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 American College of OBGYN, Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, American Medical Association, American College of OBGYN, American Academy of Pediatrics, how do all these hundreds and hundreds of different institutions come out with the exact same verbiage of a gag and threat? Doctor, nurse, if you spread misinformation, we will remove, you will be punished. How do you do that? I mean, that's not possible. That's within a 6-week time frame or a 1-month time frame in September 2021. You know that's not possible.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you sent me this article that looks like it was published, just published, 30th of April 2022, COVID-19 and the Unraveling of Experimental Medicine, Part 3, right?
That's right.
Let me see if I can share my screen and just ask you some questions about that. Here we go. All right, so COVID-19 and the Unraveling of Experimental Medicine. So just tell us what is the main thrust of this article?
Well, this is a trilogy. You got part 1, part 2, and part 3. And the purpose of this trilogy was, okay, you don't believe the data, you don't believe the data that's pulled from VAERS, or you don't believe anything else that anybody against the vaccine has published. How about this? How about we use your own peer-reviewed published manuscripts to show yourselves what that you're obviously colluding, you're obviously dead wrong. So what we did in these 3-part series, and I would urge your readers to get a copy of all of them and download them and print them. But there's over 2,500 peer-reviewed published manuscripts in their own literature that document that they're dead wrong using their own scientific method. So what I would do is maybe first let's look at the slide that you have up. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so basically what I've done in this slide, and this obviously was not available the last time we talked, I took the number of deaths in VAERS, the number of vaccines that were administered, COVID-19 vaccines, which I have in the United States. And then we divide that by the 6 other vaccines that were administered most commonly in 2021 also. So now we're looking at apples compared to apples. We're looking at VAERS database, and we're looking at a ratio, an odds ratio here. This is called a forest plot. And I love forest plots. I don't think you can see my mouse, can you?
No.
No, but if you point to that meningococcal vaccine on the y-axis there, and you see the forest plot will look at a odds ratio. So the chance of a patient dying from meningococcal vaccine, of which millions were administered. Don't quote me on that. I don't know the exact number. I do have it to construct this graph, but you'll look at the odds ratio is well above 350. That's unheard of for an odds ratio. Typically with an odds ratio, we're looking at 1 point something or 1.5. And as long as this 95% confidence interval, and by the way, this is not complete here because this extends out further, but it's nowhere near unity. Unity is going to be way here, so it's way statistically significant.
So just to have everyone make sure everyone's on the same page with us, are you saying that it's 350 times more likely that you would die from getting a COVID vaccine versus a meningococcal vaccine?
That's exactly right.
I mean, that's just, and then the 95% confidence interval means that it could be anywhere from 50 up to actually like the other side of it's not here, given over here. But some of these confidence intervals are a lot smaller. This one has just happened to be quite big. But even if it was 50, even if the true value was 50, that would still be shocking.
It would be shocking because that's not what we're, in medicine, if you take an odds ratio of 1.2, you're looking at a 20% increase. And if that 95% confidence interval doesn't cross 1, it's statistically significant. So you're looking at statistical significance. It's so robust, a p-value that's down to 1 in a million, which for all intents and purposes is, it's
it's impossible that it couldn't be a real result.
And now you can say, well, Dr. Thorpe, this and that, and you can cut to pieces and say, I don't like your model. But the beauty of this model is, guess what? It's so robust. You don't like something and you make a change. It's not going to make a 1 iota, 1 angstrom, 1 millimeter of difference in any of the data because it's so powerful and so robust. And that's the point that I want to stress. You go down to varicella, okay, you're looking at a 200-fold increase in death with COVID-19 vaccine compared to varicella. Same year, you're looking at influenza. You're looking at over 150-fold increase in deaths. Same year, same other extenuating circumstances. Go down to the Tdap or DTaP. They're different formulations, and they were both given last year. That's a pretty tight confidence interval. You're looking at over 150-fold. And look at the low end of that confidence interval, you're looking at 125. That's absurdly statistically robust. MMR, same thing. This 95% confidence interval, nowhere near unity. This is up to 25 or so. Statistically, if this were an odds ratio of 1.5 or 1.2, and the 95% confidence interval went down to 1.0, okay, yeah, this might not be statistically significant. There's nothing like that here. This is 1 in a million. Same thing with a hepatitis B vaccine. And then if you go down to the table, and I shared this with Dr. Peter McCulloch, and he went nuts over this table because I heard him on an interview saying, there's probably around 1,000 peer-reviewed published manuscripts documenting severe adverse events associated with the vaccine, and that's only in 16 months of rollout. And I sent him a really sweet email, and I said, we talked some chit chat, but I said, actually, there's not 1,000, as of March 16th or April 1st, there are 1,366, and there's way more now, documented peer-reviewed publications. And the beauty of the open source journal, the online journals, this Gazette of the Gazette of Medical Sciences, they published every single one of those in essence, a PDF online format that anybody can go into and copy, and go in and look at every single one of them and study and read every single one of these 1,366 publications, like I did and like my team members did, like the other physicians interested in this have done. That's a lot of peer-reviewed publications in medical literature published. So, that in of itself is an extreme concern. And I love this table because if you look at the table, I spent a massive amount of time organizing them topically and alphabetically. So as I said to Dr. Peter McCullough, and he loved this, he said he's going to be citing it widely, from here on out. And by the way, I'm still keeping this, and there's a lot more than 1,400 now. It's categorized by subject matter, and so anybody, layperson or medical person, nurse, doctor, lab tech, priest, pastor, whatever, can go in and say, I want to look at some of these outcomes here by subject. So there you go. It's all there. And all you have to do is it's free access. Go in and double click on the bottom of every page, and you'll go into every single one of those references. So I think that's really powerful. And then the next graphic is that you'll see is also a forest plot. And I love forest plots because, well, I'm a numbers guy and a statistician. I love analytics amongst other things, especially high risk OB. But it says it all. So now what I've done is I've taken the number of publications, and I haven't even controlled for the length of time. And I looked at the same vaccinations, okay, and did the same odds ratio as the top graphic. Now what we're looking at is what is the odds ratio for the number of publications for COVID-19 vaccination documenting complications versus those same 6 other vaccines. And let's do an odds ratio on that. Well, Dr. Sider, it's stunning, okay?
And this is just with, a couple of years of,
this
publications, right? Compared to the entire history of these other vaccines.
50 or 60 years of other, like some of the flu vaccines and the other vaccines are 60, 70 years old. So I didn't even set a time frame on those. So of all those other vaccinations, there's not one of those other vaccinations in all of their 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 year history. There's not a one of them even has more than 40 publications. Not a one. And so look at the odds ratio here. The odds ratios are so stunning, and show your audience that with your cursor down there, that X axis, it's logarithmic. It's not. Right. It's not a linear. It's logarithmic. So I couldn't even get it on here. When you start talking about odds ratios in the range of 20 or 30,000, or you're looking at an odds ratio here. This is logarithmic scale. You're looking at 8,000, 9,000, 9,000. Even here, you're looking at an odds ratio of probably 3,000, 4,000. I mean, it's just stunning.
So basically, we couldn't have compared all of these odds ratios on a normal scale. You had to make it logarithmic so that you could fit them all in one graph.
That's exactly right. And again, people will come and, like you said at the opening of our show, is you said, well, Jim, how there's other confounding variables. Well, yes, there are other confounding variables, but no matter how you slice this cheese, okay, you got the same results. There's a stunning number of publications. And by the way, Dr. Hyder, all in the same time frame where people are afraid to death to put their name on a paper. They're afraid to death of publishing it, or they'll get brutally attacked. But yet, and each one of these, say 1,400 publications now, each one of them has, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6, or 7 authors. So, you're looking at, good grief, you might be looking at 5,000 expert researchers that are putting their name on a document that could make them lose their job.
Yeah, I think people don't really realize what a chilling effect it has on physicians when you threaten their livelihood, especially with in the modern age when people have such a high level of debt. It's not surprising. I don't know. It's surprising and yet not surprising in some ways. that
It's
physicians have been, shut up the way that they have in the United States,
it's
around the
very
world.
upsetting when I see my colleagues, Dr. Hyder, and my hats are off to you. You're a brave soul and you're a truth seeker. And some really scholastic and physicians that I respect incredibly, like Dr. Peter Bregan, and I could list off many others. He tells us, I have a close relationship with he and his beautiful bride and my wife, and he tells us that truth seekers represent less than 1% of the population. And you should take that as a compliment, Dr. Hyder, because you're a truth seeker. Otherwise, you wouldn't be talking to me like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's important. I mean, I still have trouble understanding why more people haven't spoken out. And I don't know, sometimes I try to put myself in other people's shoes. So what do you see with your colleagues? I mean, what is it? Is it literally you think it's fear for their job and their livelihood, or is it are a lot of them actually brainwashed to actually do they actually believe what the mainstream media and what the CDC are saying?
I think there's like at least three levels of factors here. But number one is, people that I know and love and have worked with my entire life. Many of them know what's going on, but they just, they can't speak out or they'll lose their job. They just don't have your chutzpah. They don't have your boldness. They don't have your courage, Dr. Hyder. They don't have your intellectual integrity. So that's number one. Number two, now, and I don't care to know any personal information on your side about vaxxed or not. It's irrelevant. But, most of them, the vast majority of them, have gotten the vaccination. So this is a fait accompli. They can't go back and unvaccinate themselves. Mm-hmm. So now they get into the second level of psychological reaction. They cannot live with the fact that they've done something irreversible to themselves. So
not just themselves, oftentimes their patients, right? And
that's the third level. That's my number 3 level. So there's 3 levels. The third level is now they got to buy the sham hook, line, and sinker, because how many patients have I killed and damaged, and now I can't admit to that. Otherwise, not only will I lose my job and lose my credibility, lose my oath to God, my oath to the Hippocratic oath, and as in my case, the oath as a military officer. I can't risk that, so I got to keep going along with the gag. The more you lie, the deeper you get stuck into the quagmire of the results of the lies. So ultimately, they're going, and I'm speaking to my friends here, my colleagues who want to pick apart everything that I see and deny it. Your day of reckoning is coming. You have violated the Hippocratic Oath. And by the way, colleagues, it was never incumbent upon Dr. Hyder or Dr. Thorpe or Dr. Bregan or Dr. Fill in the blank, 17,000 doctors around the world. It was never incumbent upon us to prove that you've killed and maimed people permanently. You have it back asswards. It was incumbent upon you to prove it was safe before you rolled this out and killed and maimed a lot of patients, a lot of pregnant moms.
And coerce so many people to take it. I mean, that's the worst thing that I can imagine, that so many Americans felt stuck between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't give up their work or their job, and they went ahead and got something that they didn't really want, that they were afraid of getting.
And they're dropping like flies. And it's we talked about realnotrare.com last time. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds, there's well over thousands of pro-vaxxers that went in, they trusted you, they trusted me, they trusted the healthcare system, they trusted their doctors, and guess what? They're permanently damaged. If they haven't been killed, they're permanently damaged. And I post every single one of these. I have a Getter account, GETTR, and it's at capital JAMES Thorpe, THORP, MD. And every single day I post these patients, because guess what the left and the physicians do? They mock them, they call them crazy, They tell them it's all in their head. They throw them under the bus. They deplatform them. Not me. These are heroes. These are people that are healthcare providers, many of them young, beautiful nurses, young, beautiful physicians who are permanently damaged. And now they have the integrity to come out and tell their story. And I've had many physicians who, who have come out and told their story and said, my older brother and my mentor is one of them, Ken Thorpe. And the senior author on the COVID trilogies. Ken and I went to medical school together. Ken is one of the most brilliant physicians I've ever met in my life. Ken went out and got both rounds of vaccines because, he was forced to, and he doesn't like to make waves. He'd never be on your show. But, he's come around to, this is clearly, you see for yourself what he's published. But people that have the intellectual integrity to come back and say, hey, I was really wrong, and now I'm writing this, I'm apologizing because I was really wrong and I misled you. And by the way, I always take that opportunity to do that, probably more than I should, because I think it's the mark of a true academician and a true godly hero. And it's a terrific witness to my children. When I can go to my children and say, or my mentees, my young students, my residents, my younger colleagues, and say, you know what? I was really wrong. And you were right. And, will you accept my apology? I really learned something from you. I take the opportunity to do that. I take the opportunity. I have some young physicians that I've trained in OB, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they were telling me 20 years ago that vaccines were horrible. Well, I've never been an anti-vaxxer. And I challenged them and I got in their face and I didn't believe them. I was one of those jerks, and I've apologized to them. I said, I was wrong. You were right. I wish more people could do that. That's the first level, but I think those underlying two levels of psychological denial, in terms of their oath to their profession, their loss of their job, and then the medical legal liability. But in the end, the truth will be exposed. And I would say to my colleagues, admit you're wrong, before, don't create a reaction formation, and don't get psychotic, mass psychosis formation. Look at the data, admit you're wrong, and come over to our side and let's speak the truth.
Absolutely. This is really such an important thing, and I just pray that your colleagues start to wake up and start to, admit that the mistakes that they made, and not just your colleagues, but my colleagues as well, and all the physicians in this country and around the world. And it's really the mark, like you said, of really the evolved person, right? If you can't admit you're wrong, if you're too proud to say that, hey, I got it wrong, then you really shouldn't be doing this.
That's right. Listen, we're human beings. We're allowed to be wrong. I'm going to make mistakes and be wrong until the day I take my last breath, which, I hope is sooner than later, with this horrible world we live in. I want to say something else that my legal forensic team have come up with that is just, it's really upsetting. And I just learned this week. I've suspected this for a long time. Dr. Hyder, the two people, I just sense that you're a God-fearing man, and I know I am. But I think that where are the two places, the two professions that we would trust and care for and value the most? Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself and for most people. It would be your pastor and your doctor. And guess what? Are you still there? Whoops. I think I can't hear you, Dr. Hyder. Can't hear you, or I can't see you. Maybe I'll come in again. Oh, maybe you're coming. Dr. Hyder? Private chat. Hey, there you are. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think that was my fault. Something happened to my internet connection at the worst time. So you were saying, what were you saying?
Yeah, good question. What was I saying is that the people in this, in our tradition, our culture, and it may span cultures, is that the people that we trust the most are our pastors, our priests, our rabbis, our and our doctors. Well, guess what else that my forensic legal team came up with this week, and I've known this: $6 to $10 billion have been given to the churches to promulgate the lie and to push the vaccine on their congregations. And I'm so upset over that I don't think my wife and I will ever attend a church again because they're all corrupt, or the vast majority of them. We'll do our own home church with friends that want to.
This kind of brings up for me something that was so confusing for me, right? I studied some functional medicine, and usually functional medicine practitioners are at the forefront of anything like groundbreaking treatments, groundbreaking, diagnoses, diagnostic methods, and they were just completely missing with COVID, right? Like I barely saw anyone who was treating this with anything off label. And the same thing when I went to like a place of worship. I'm Muslim, and I would go to like a mosque, and multiple different mosques, and no one was talking about this stuff, right? Like everyone was just on the same exact page as the government. And the preachers would be saying this, and everyone would be masking and distancing and everything. And then the only people that were given kind of a platform would be like some doctor from the community who would again be saying the exact same thing, that you would be hearing on CNN and from Dr. Fauci. So yeah, I've been puzzled myself. It's just like, what is going on in the world and in America?
It's just crazy. But there is beauty that comes out of this. I have some very, very dear Syrian who are United States citizens, but friends, and I've been involved with their care of many of my Muslim colleagues. And what's interesting is that the Muslims have a very, very similar culture as my Christian colleagues and my Jewish colleagues. Mm-hmm. Very, very similar. And what's happened is that this has brought many of us together. Peter Bregan. Peter Bregan's a Jew. It's brought many of us together who were brought together like family because we seek commonality of truth. And I've lost so many of my Christian friends who won't even. I started to wonder. I was very closely associated with dear friends with a lot of pastors. They won't touch me. They won't return my calls. The vast majority of them. I have one pastor that is truth, and he's experienced the same thing. These other pastors, and why again does a church need COVID relief? You give me a break. It's bribe money. It's blood money. This is Judas
when so
blood
many
money.
of them were just closed, right? They weren't even
Yeah.
open. There was nothing
Yeah.
to do.
Give me a break. So now they're double dipping from the federal government, and most people continue to give, even though they weren't going to church. And they're just greedy, money hungry, fake religious people. They're totally fake and insecure. They're leading their flock into the deadly vaccines and into disinformation and misinformation, and they're taking money for it.
Yeah, I think what people don't realize is that it's not always conscious. I mean, it can also just be bias, right? It's monetary bias. And it's the same thing like in medicine, right? You expect people to, reveal whether they have any, connections to Big Pharma, whether they're on the payroll of Big Pharma. I think we should be asking the same thing of our religious leaders, everyone, right? That, are you on the payroll of Big Pharma, right? Is the government giving you money? And even if you're not consciously aware of the bias that it introduces, people know. I mean, if you're not, I mean, anyone can tell that if somebody doesn't bite the hand that's feeding them, right? So if somebody's giving you, like the medical boards, if somebody's giving you $10 million, you're going to be heavily biased towards their position.
Yeah. Amen. And, Dr. Hyder, we can extend that to our paychecks, physicians' paychecks too. I mean, isn't that kind of a blood money? I mean, you're continuing to be gainfully employed despite the fact that you've horribly broken your covenant with your God and your covenant to the Hippocratic Oath, which is your patient. You've completely destroyed it. You're living a lie. So what do you take as a quid pro quo? You take your paycheck. Instead of trusting in God, who's going to take care of you no matter what. And, I hats off to my employer, and I won't mention them because they sure as heck don't share my beliefs. They're pushing the vaccine, but, they love me, and I provide an incredible service for them and for their patients. They all love me. I work off site. I don't talk about my opinions unless I'm asked. And if I'm asked, you better be willing to hear me out because you're going to get an earlobe. I've seen so many vaccine-injured, beautiful young pregnant women, and I still am going to use the politically incorrect term of maternal, of women, okay, because it's our liberal colleagues who believe their evidence-based medicine is, a quote trans woman who actually is a male can go and get implant and birth control pills and go try to have a period and go get a pap smear. I'm not kidding you. And they play along with the game. I mean, I'm not going to do that. You got libs of TikTok. Have you, libs?
Yeah.
I mean, look at some of that stuff. My wife made me watch that stuff, and I would get an upset tummy. But then I realized that she's not saying anything. She's just posting what she's taking off. Look at these imbeciles that are making fools of themselves and posting this stuff. And so I'm reposting lib of TikToks because this is what evidence-based medicine comes from being liberal. No, I'm sorry. There's a man and a woman. It says it in the Quran. It says it in the Bible. It doesn't take a rocket scientist.
Yeah. You don't even need the Quran or the Bible to tell you, right? You can see it's the evidence of your own eyes.
And then we have a SCOTUS, a Supreme Court that I don't know what a woman is. Well, then get the hell out of your position. What do you mean you don't know what a woman is? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so much of our laws are actually, designed in such a way as they do distinguish between men and women, right? That a lot of it is written into the law. So I don't see how you can even be a judge if you can't tell who a woman is, right?
So,
it's impossible to be a judge. There's laws that are specifically written for women.
Yeah, this is evidence-based law and evidence-based medicine of the liberals, and it's very similar to the famous book that was written at the turn of the century, and I'll think of the author's name in a little bit. But liberals are mentally ill. This progressivism, where we we've lost all sanity in this world.
Yeah, I kind of realized how it happens recently in the last couple of days. My son was talking about something that he read in a science book, and I was like, what science book are you reading, right? And I told my wife, we need to like read what we're giving them before we give it to them. But like you're raised from a very young level being given these messages in school, and it's a form of brainwashing, right? You have these beliefs that are just instilled at you in a young age when you don't have the ability to really, reason through it or think about it for yourself. Young children, they just take things as truth, right? They just take it and they just categorize it as a fact because they
That's
don't
right.
have yet the mental capacity or the ability to reason through things and decide for themselves based on different evidence, and they just don't have that ability yet. And so traditional schooling recognized that, and they would have them memorize for the first 7-8 years of their life. It was all rote memorization, and then after that, in the next 7-8 years, they would start to think about things and debate things, and do all of that with classical education. But nowadays, I think it's really important the way so many people are starting to wake up to what's being taught in schools. These schools are really propagandizing our children. We have run out of time, but can you stay a little bit longer, because there was one other thing I wanted to
Absolutely.
ask you about. I'm just going to
I'll
share.
stay as long as you want, Dr.
Okay,
Hyder.
okay, great. I'm going to pull up the the paper again, and I wanted to highlight this because this is the first I had heard about it related to COVID. But can you tell us a little bit about ozone preconditioning?
Oh, yes. Th- this is ultimately, all of disease is based upon organ-specific energy deprivation. Now, there's not been a single disease ever cured with the atomists, what I call the atomists, the cellular biologists who have gained more and more and more information by looking more deeply at the molecular and cellular level. Am I saying that none of that exists? Of course not. What I'm saying is that everything that we visualize at a cell receptor level, at a cellular level, at a nuclear level, at a mitochondrial level, at a blood level, at a genetic level, yes, that all occurs, but it's not how the body functions and how the body gets ill. That's all passive. And we threw that all out 150 years ago when the corporatists came in and essentially eliminated all of the other physicians, specialists that believed in a higher form of healing, a more spiritual form of healing since for 4,000 years, since Aristotle. It's always believed that body was an energy dependent. And so what we've learned is, and I'll go back to a stunning discovery by Sir Dr. Murray in 1986, a cardiologist, that made this stunning discovery of ischemic preconditioning in animals. And just to cut to the chase, what he did was he would ligate coronary vessels for a period of time that would cause a demise of the animal. And then what he would do was, okay, let's only do a new batch of animals, and let's give only half of the known lethal dose, and repeat that. And then what happens is that if you do that, there is a time period where 4 hours later, and then 24 hours later, like an echo, of a massive protective effect in the body. That's been known since 1986. It was discovered, and not one scientist, not one physician, there's 4,000 publications later that document it. Nobody can determine what the etiology, the physiology of that effect is. We know that if we take that blood out and put it in another animal, that it gets the same protective effect. We also know that if it's not just in the heart that it protects, it's in every single one of the organs. So going back to almost a little bit of homeopathic type of thought, which, by the way, we destroyed. We took them out. We didn't think they were good enough, so we eliminated them. That's what we do in our culture. We eliminate competition, people that don't have the same beliefs, and we replaced it with this corporate mentality that's going to make billions, and we're going to cure all the diseases. That's what was promised to us 150 years. Now let's fast forward to today. Over the last 100 years, the chronic disease state has skyrocketed to nothing before. All these promises, all of these theories of how medicine works and how patients should be treated are in the dumpster because we have more chronic illness and disease than at any other time in human history. It's all, so there's a hierarchical energetics in the body. What we've learned is that there is an electric circuit in the body, energetics in the body. So ozone preconditioning is a potent oxidizer, oxidant, and one of the most potent oxidants known to man in the human body. And by the way, it is a natural substance along with hydrogen peroxide. So what we started treating, and I've been using ozone for a decade now, and looking in the literature, there's a massive amount of literature with it. Our early treatment protocol actually included ozone. There's a variety of ways you can give it, but I work also with one of my local colleagues, and I will mention her name because she's gotten a lot more bolder and braver. Her name is Dr. Deborah Viglione, and Dr. Viglione, and through her practice, and also my research team up in Michigan, Ken, and other colleagues around the country are using a massive amount of ozone in treatment of a lot of different diseases. But it's not just ozone, it's any energetics. The body is composed of an energetics field that is ultimately hierarchically connected to our soul and to our creator. And every beat of the heart is not to pump blood. The heart is not a pump. Diastole is not inactive passive filling. No, I can prove it to you. I can prove it to you in the fetus by diagnostic studies that I have available to me, by color flow. And Ken, my older brother, as an interventional radiologist, can prove it to you in the adult. The diastole is active. It sucks the blood back. And yes, it does push the blood out, but the function of the heart is to put the electrical energy into the blood, and it's dispersed throughout the entire body with every beat of the heart. And we know that because we can detect it with an EKG. So that's and that's not the only kind of energy that we get. We also have resonant light energy from the sun and from other sources that we have. And we also have EMR, electromagnetic, that's clean and healthy, like the geomagnetic field of the earth is very healthy. But we use other devices such as, a proprietary, there's a whole cadre of electromagnetic devices that have shown to provide healing through an electromagnetic mat. One of them is a beamer. So all forms of energy, be it electromagnetic, light, or chemical resonant energy, like the resonant energy that's stored in ozone, triatomic O3, can be massively healing.
Yeah, I remember reading this paper maybe a year or two ago, and it was really eye-opening. There have been some other things published about this as well, but I just wanted to show you this other tab that I have pulled up here, the kind of disinformation that you would expect in today's world. Their definition of ozone from the American Lung Association. Can you see that?
Yes.
Also called smog.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, they're trying to convince everyone that ozone is just smog.
Well, and rightfully so, because there's been literally, it's been used for over 100 years with incredible healing, and it's published the massive amount, but nobody wants to touch it, and the FDA says it's poison. And why? Because the corporations can't make any money on it.
Yeah.
It's free. It's free. And we have engineering PhDs. We've actually integrated. We can put it in energized water and get a therapeutic effect. I would inject a lot of the gas, the pure ozone gas, directly intravenously into myself, and it's very effective, by the way. But I don't even need to do that anymore because we're using a preparation of ozonated olive oil and palm oil, and also ozonated water, and we get the exact same effect than I would have achieved in patients, and we've parallel tested patients, get the exact same effect, beneficial effect, therapeutic effect than we would if we give intravenous ozonated saline. Instead of giving it intravenously by ozonated saline or by direct gas or one of these other MAH treatments that is very complicated and expensive. You just take ozonated water, which we've developed, and it's stable, or ozonated olive oil, and the ozone is stable. It imparts a massive amount of energy to your system.
That's incredible. How did you make ozonated water that was stable?
It's I've got a brilliant scientist who has multiple patents and has done work at the major engineering centers. Water is massively important for the body to work, not just because of its water, but because it's the medium by which all energy is circulated. So, for example, vitamin D and resonant light energy go within the extracellular fluid within a millimeter of your skin. That will be immediately absorbed, and it's dissipated throughout the rest of your body. Every single cell crosses a blood-brain barrier. We have used a proprietary technique to initiate resonant energy in the water, and it's now good for a month. It takes some testing, but it does work, and it is working. We also have, if you look at the research of a Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's a brilliant physics chemist, and Gerald Pollack for years, he's a full professor up at, I believe, University of Washington in Seattle, and basically what he's shown is that simply putting light, EMR, or electricity into water, you will actually store a massive amount of energy in water. And there he is. And you should read his book, The Fourth State of Water. It's unbelievable. So in essence, if you take any water and you apply either light or electric energy to it or magnetic energy, what will happen is the energy will be stored in the water molecule, and it will accumulate. It will turn it into almost like a battery, just a pure glass of water, so that the water will become more dense around the periphery. And he calls that the exclusion zone, because if you put little pieces of little teeny pellets of plastic in it, you can actually see it congregate around the edge of the interface, whereas the bulk water is in the center of that water. And if you put microelectrodes, you'll get a current across that. And to take it a step further, and I don't want to get too...
So this is fascinating. I mean, I didn't realize you were into all this stuff. You actually need this theory of the fourth phase of water to even explain how our circulation works, right?
You're exactly right. I can prove to any obstetrician out there that I'm right, because I've been studying fetal ultrasounds for decades. It's mechanically impossible for a fetal heart, which is, you think of the size of a fetal fist, not mine. Your heart is the size of your fist. It's impossible for that to circulate the entire fetal body.
Yeah.
And then through a 30 to 50 centimeter umbilical cord to the placenta. Are you kidding me?
No.
And then circulate in the placenta. And then
the peripheral resistance is just
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is, God created us in his image, and God ultimately is provided everything we need in our own bodies to heal ourselves.
That's so important to understand. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. It's not the doctor or the medicine that heals you. Oftentimes, it's just getting, rid of what's harming you, that's preventing you from healing. That's whatever it is that's preventing your body from naturally healing the way that it's designed to do. Yeah, this is just so fascinating. So you had
If you're
mentioned.
interested in this, Dr. Hyder, you should read our we have a trilogy, and that we've published all this stuff, a lot of stuff from my research group. Jim Thorpe is really my older brother. We went to medical school together. He goes, Jim, you're never going to understand this unless you de-learn, throw everything out you learn in medical school, because it's all BS. And he's right. It took me a long time to understand it. But it's every single disease in the body is an energy deficit of a certain organ. And when that energy deficit starts, it gets worse and worse and worse until you die. But we did publish a trilogy on the energy fields. We published that last year. I published the human magnetic attraction because there was all this information coming out about, people that get vaccinated have a neodymium magnet attached to them. Well, that was all nonsense. The neodymium magnet, I designed a large study, and we actually show that, well, yes, the neodymium magnet will stick to somebody, or metal will stick to somebody, but it's not because of the vaccine. It's because of the human energy field. It's a dynamic energetics field in the human being. And that's how we live. We're all a conglomeration of vibration.
Right, but does it have anything to do with the vaccination or not?
No.
No. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
We took vaccinated and unvaccinated, and as a matter of fact, if anything, the vaccination tend to diminish the neodymium magnet. We used magnetized neodymium magnets, which are about this big, and you can order them off Amazon. The paper was published about a year ago, and received very little attention, but it was pretty stunning data.
Yeah, I'd like to see that paper if you could share that.
If you private chat me or send me your email, I'll send you all those papers.
Yeah, there is a chat here on this screen. So have you tried the ozone therapy with long COVID patients yourself, or heard
Yes.
about it being used?
Yes.
What have you seen?
It's effective. You have to know how to administer it, and it is effective, as are a lot of other things. The other thing that we've used, Dr. Hyder, and this is going to sound wacky, but it's the exact same thing we've been talking about. It's all about energy. Vitamin D3, 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol. It's a very potent. It's not just a vitamin. It really regulates the whole. It's almost like the interface between our creator, the energy source, and our body's energy source. But if you take resonant light, and I know this, I know it'll sound crazy, but my scientists, my colleagues up in Michigan, we've been doing this now for almost 10 years. If you take a resonant white light, no UV, and you have a switching mechanism that's advanced, and I can't give you the proprietary frequencies, but I will tell you that the lower amplitude, the lower amplitude will oscillate. And by oscillating, for your viewers, I mean it turns on and off in the range of hundreds per second. So your retina and your brain can't even detect that. But then we have another light in the same, and these lights are about this big. We have another light that will oscillate at tens of thousands of times per second. So that when you put those they resonate together. And if you put them like at this angle in front of your face, and that's what I do, and that's what our patients do, it's an unbelievable, it's like a keyboard. Think about a keyboard that goes from 100 times per second to tens of thousands times per second. Every single seventh key is resonant state, and that all goes right into your skin at the subdermal level, just a millimeter, and then all that energy is dissipated, okay, into your entire body, goes to your brain. So we focus that on the kidneys and we focus that on the eyes. It doesn't hurt the eyes. It has cured seizure disorder. I'm talking about patients that have status epilepticus.
What's it called though? What's the name of the therapy? So people can look it up. Resonant light therapy. So is this something that you can find available in clinics?
No, ours is pre-market. Nobody else has the advanced switching mechanisms that we have. We have prototypes, a dozen prototypes, pre-production models, and I'm telling you that it is just phenomenal. And my wife had long COVID and she got massive. And it actually is super additive with the ozone because they do the same thing. They're resonant energy, but one is chemical, the other one is light.
So when will this be available?
I don't know. There's many white lights and different color lights on the market, but I haven't seen anything that can compare to ours. We just need to, it works. We just need the seed money and we need to get it into production. And that's, as you know, that's a very, very expensive process. But in the meantime, every time we give one away, I never get it back because nobody else will get it back.
Is this based on the Rife machine? There's this from the 1930s, something that was developed. Let me see. There was a physician, Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, did something with resonant light in the 30s.
I don't know that. You're teaching me something.
So tell us about the ozone. I mean, can you share the protocol for using ozone?
Sure. I've used it for a long time. There's 1,000 ways you can administer it. What you cannot do is, and I don't want any of your audience or anybody out there, do not go out and buy an ozone machine. If you go on to anywhere, go to Amazon, there's probably 250 or 300 ozone machines. These are commercial grade. You cannot do that. Do not go and order an ozone machine and use it. Do not do that. You can't do that. Ozone is a highly reactive species and it can harm you. If you directly inhale a lot of it, you'll get sick. So you can't inhale it. It has to be administered in any other format other than through the lungs. And by the way, Dr. Hyder, it's the exact same as oxygen, you know. You can't take large concentrations of oxygen or you'll kill yourself.
A lot of patients don't understand that. They come to me and they're like, "Can you just prescribe me oxygen just in case? I feel better with it."
And the FDA says, "Well, no, it's poison." Well, guess what? So is water. Water is poison if you breathe water.
Yeah, it's all about the dose.
So, anyways, it's
and the method of how you take it. Obviously, you can't breathe water.
You can administer ozone rectally, directly as gas. You can administer it in the ear by infusing into the ear, small amounts of it. You can put it in a whole cadre of different oils where it's actually stable for months and months and months. Rub that on your body. You can put it in the bladder. You can put it in the peritoneal cavity. You can put it in joints. You can put it in the neck between the vertebrae, in the intervertebral bodies, within the foramina. You can put it anywhere you want as long as you don't drink it. I'm sorry, inhale it. You can drink the ozonated water. And also, I have a machine that puts out the strongest, which is 120 microgram per ml of ozone. Ozone is 50 times more soluble in water than is oxygen. So, I can actually I can directly inject. I'm not advising anybody to do this. I'm crazy, but and I do a lot of experimentation on myself. I was up to 120 ml of direct ozone gas directly injected into my vein. I would do it myself, and amazing benefits. And there's a lot of people that use that around the country. Now that's overkill. You don't need that much, but I did it just to determine, what the margin of safety was. And
So you'd mentioned there's ozonated oils also, like coconut oil, olive oil, that people put on topically. Does that work also as
oh
a way
yeah,
of absorbing it?
it does. And we're producing that now, and I use it a lot. In fact, another paper that we just published, ozone preconditioning. I don't know if you got that one, but I presented 2 cases in which we used the resonant light therapy and the ozone for the first time ever in world medical history to treat intrauterine severe fetal CMV infection, cytomegalovirus infection. And CMV is one of the most common congenital infections, but sometimes you can get it so bad that it's really bad. And both of these obstetricians recommended that they terminate their pregnancies, and my patients wouldn't do that. And Dr. Thorpe, what else do you have to offer? And I said, you really want to do this? You really want to go down this rabbit hole? Well, my first baby just turned a year old. She's beautiful. She's completely normal. The second baby is 6 months old, completely normal. And we use resonant light therapy, our resonant light device, and we used it in combination with ozone. Now, I use some other medications as well, but it was just amazing the effect that we had.
Wow. I'm glad that we had this conversation, because the last time I spoke to you, I didn't realize that you were into all of these things. I mean, you're really quite a deep guy. The kind of stuff that you're studying. I could probably talk to you all night. I need to go
Likewise with you,
and
Dr.
read some more about some of this stuff that you're involved with. I had no idea. I thought you were just talking about COVID, but this is really, really tremendous. It's great. So to get back to the initial question, can you tell people, like you had mentioned that you have to take ozone the right way in order for it to be effective for long COVID. So is there a protocol? Like, do you apply it once a day or twice a day? I mean, what is the right way?
The right way is to start out slow, and like, for example, if you can, you can go to Amazon right now, and you can pull up, and I'll just show you right now. I use a lot of this. The Amazon stuff, it's not really as good as our stuff, but it does have some effect. And
But can people buy the one that you recommend somewhere?
it's, again, we make it so quickly that everybody there's in constant need. But again, we're kind of pre-production. But I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I think it's the one I just pulled up on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah,
Olive.
You got it. So
Pure O3 ozonated
yeah,
olive oil.
and I use that, and a lot of my pregnant women have used it. My pregnant women that have energy deficient states, whether they're whether they have an infection or whether they have a seizure disorder, and what I do is I just tell them, if you order this stuff, just start out, and first of all, make sure your skin, just put it on a small patch of your skin and see how you feel. And then start using more of it. You can't overdose on it. It is safe. That preparation is not as therapeutic as ours, and we've tested it back to back.
So the one that you're making is not. Are you planning to make it commercially available, or it's just not?
Yeah, when we get it up and running, there's a lot of licensures involved, and our production facility is up in Michigan. Yeah, it's going to be up soon, and it will be, God willing, available soon.
Is there some place people can go to just keep up to date with what you're doing?
I don't have a website. I'm a full-time clinician. If you have want to do any of your audience wants to do a further deep dive, contact me at jathorp@bellsouth.net. I can put you in touch with my brother. By the way, we're treating a lot of vaccine injured with the ozone, and it really, really helps, because the vaccine injured is, again, what
energy problem.
It's energy. It's all energetics.
So have you seen people get 100% better with long COVID or vaccine injuries or both? Or it is always just like 90, 95%? Is there always something left?
No, I've seen people get completely cured. My beautiful bride being one of them, um, and she was not vaccinated, thank God. And we've had several very close friends who have been vaccinated and have had horrible vaccine injuries, and I mean permanent vaccine injuries. And I'm so grateful she didn't take it. I would have supported her no matter what. Now, her long COVID has been, we've used multi-modality treatment and the light therapy, the ozone. We use a whole variety, continue to use hydroxychloroquine. We'll be using ivermectin intermittently, a lot of vitamin D3, a lot of the zinc, Lugol iodine, really key to the immune system as well. And I use that. If you pull up that iodine solution on one of the SSI that you just brought up on Amazon, that's the one I recommend, and it's just 2 drops a day. I just put it down the hatch. I use several more than that drops, but I think that 2 drops and 3 or 4 ounces of water, swish it around down the hatch. You can also use that same solution, and not to get gross, but dip it in that iodine solution or the ozone solution. Pick your
So
nose.
are you saying that the same company makes an iodine preparation?
No, it's not the same company. It's what I use is I have I have done my due diligence on all these products. I'm very hesitant to ever use anything from that I'm not familiar with. But it's called J. Crow's.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I've seen that. Yep. Yeah, it's
Um,
on Amazon.
and
Yeah.
and then the melatonin, believe it or not, has some efficacy. This sounds crazy, but nicotine has some efficacy. Don't go out
Hmm.
and smoke. Don't go out and smoke it. But it has some efficacy. CBD, don't smoke it. Has some efficacy. Don't vape it. Don't smoke or vape anything. It's very damaging to your lungs. So quercetin, a lot of the yin and the yang with oxidants and antioxidants. It's a whole concept of not as powerful, but of preconditioning. The whole oxidant antioxidant is a form of preconditioning, and it's very effective as well.
So you have seen people, I think that a lot of people come to me and ask, has anyone fully recovered? Because a lot of places that I go, um, I'll see, for example, IncelDX is a company that tests for, long COVID. They have a test for it. And then there's a fasting protocol that people have seen online. And everywhere you go, everyone who's talking about long COVID, they'll often be done with you once you're 90% better. Then they kind of they say, okay, that's about as much as I can do. you know but so I think it is really reassuring. People need to have this hope that they
Yes.
can get back to 100% normal, if they keep trying different things. And so this is great. I wasn't aware of ozone being used, and so I'll
Talk,
start to tell people about that.
talk to me about your experience, and talk to me about the long active COVID tests that you're utilizing. I need to learn more about that.
So there's only one company I know of that has a test, and it's called IncelDX. You can find that at covidlonghaulers.com. And it's not my company. I don't get money from them or anything, but they're the only company I know of in the world that has developed a test, and it's basically a panel of immune markers. And they use some artificial intelligence, some machine learning, to come up with a pattern of immune cell dysfunction that they found in people with long COVID. And it's a very similar immune dysfunction that you see with vaccine injuries, basically the same. And also, interestingly enough, you also see it with other post infectious syndromes. So you see it similar dysfunction in Lyme disease, mold toxicity, a lot of different things may be, related. They may have some relationship with long COVID. There's also long flu. I didn't even know that until long COVID came around. I didn't realize there was such an entity. Some people have persistent symptoms after the flu. I guess
didn't know.
doctors,
Hmm.
it's
Wow.
just much less prevalent. Maybe 15% or something. That's the number I saw of people who've had the flu will end up with some persistent symptoms after it. I mean, it's very common with mono, right? We know that,
Yes.
but apparently it even happens with the flu, and it happens with a lot of infections. A small percentage of people will be left with some chronic immune dysfunction. So with it, COVIDlonghaulers.com, Bruce Patterson's the physician. He's put this together. He's a HIV researcher who's started working on long COVID now. And the last I heard, they can also test what they think is triggering the immune dysfunction, and what's keeping it going is the S1 subunit of the spike protein, which is being held by non-classical monocytes in the body. So once that's cleared out, they'll find that people's symptoms also go away, and the immune dysfunction stops. It stops after that S1. And so the last I checked, they could actually test you for the S1 subunit, and they would the test that I saw, it showed 3 or 4 different monocyte lineages, and they tested each one to see if it had S1 subunit of the spike protein in it. So you can do those 2 tests. You can do the in-cell-kind panel, which is the immune marker panel, and then the second test that they have is the S1 subunit of the spike protein. And so what they recommend is you treat the immune dysfunction until it kind of calms down, and then retest, see if you still have this S1 subunit of the spike protein. If that's cleared out and you still have a problem, then it may be a resurgence of some other chronic issue that became resurgent because of the long COVID that you were experiencing. So a lot of people will they'll hit a wall in terms of their recovery, and it's not really COVID anymore. You've addressed COVID, your body's cleared out the spike protein. That's not a problem anymore. But now you have something else. Maybe you have a resurgence of mono or something else that your body had gotten under control, in the past, and now you have to deal with that, separately.
Wow. Talk to me about other modalities that you're using that I didn't mention, please.
So yeah, the medications and the vitamins and supplements, and then there's the fasting protocol. That's Tom Bunker's fasting protocol. He also sees people get 90-95% better. The one thing that I recently learned about that I just learned about was stem cell therapy. So it was, I forget who it was, but somebody mentioned to me that they had used it for their patients, and so Steve Kirsch has it on his blog. He just he has a Substack. I don't know if you're
Yes, I know
registered with a
Steve.
Substack. Yeah, so Steve Kirsch just wrote a Substack about a physician that he I think is an allergist or immunologist. No, it was a somebody who does, I forget his specialty, but anyway, he had used exosomes from stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, and he said that a one-time, I think, 30-minute infusion of these stem cell exosomes could cure long COVID, and he specifically used it in people with hypoxia and really bad hypoxia, and he found that within a week they would recover. So within days, he would find recoveries. So that I think is really promising, and I had never even thought. Obviously I've heard of stem cell therapies, and my father has Parkinson's. He tried one; it didn't really do anything. But I was surprised to learn that it may be effective, and apparently is very effective for long COVID. And so that doctor was actually part of a study that hasn't been published yet. The results aren't out yet. But
is this group the group in Salt Lake City?
That sounds right, but I don't remember. I don't recall.
Yeah, it is definitely it's really expensive, and I know that a lot of as I'm afflicted and disabled with some 17 segment fusion, a lot of back pain that I deal with. A lot of people have talked to me about it, and I know a lot of people that have gone out there for stem cell injections all up and down their fusion or their trauma sites. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked well for that particular
For a
indication.
lot of different indications, it doesn't seem to work at all. So I was really surprised that somebody was saying that it was very effective for long COVID, and it was also used for acute COVID. And so there have been some articles published with stem cells in acute and long COVID. I'm trying to find it. I can't seem to find it. I mean, I just pulled up his Substack, but I don't see the article that I was talking about. Stem cells. Let's see, rheumatologist Robert Jackson. Here it is. Let me share this. I'll just pull it up. So there it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Robert Jackson, 40%. Yeah, so he was talking about some other stuff, but towards the end of the article, he mentions mesenchymal stem cell derived exosome treatment, and the results that he's seen. So hopefully wasn't aware when the paper would be out, but the data collection has been completed. So hopefully he thought the paper would be published in the next month or so.
Wow.
That it's really the same thing that everyone else is doing. Personally, I had long COVID, and back then I didn't know what it was. I had it in the summer of 2020, and for a few months. And I actually went to a Chinese herbalist, and they helped me get rid of a lot of the symptoms. They didn't get me back to 100% normal, but they really helped with the sleep, and I had trouble sleeping and some anxiety. And then I was using things like qigong and breathing exercises and a lot of other things just to try to help myself with the symptoms. And they were helpful, but they didn't get rid of the symptoms entirely. I think it was mostly time that got rid of my symptoms. They just gradually wore off and got better.
The breathing is really important. I'm interested in that as well. I've never had long COVID, but there's something about the rhythmic, deep breathing that is very therapeutic. And I can't put my finger on it. I don't understand mechanisms, but it's not just take a deep breath. Not that. It's real. I don't understand it.
Yeah, there's so much that we don't understand, and it's unfortunate that in the modern world, if we can't see a clear path to making money off of it, we don't oftentimes pursue information like the fact that the heart doesn't pump the blood. That's something that everyone should be deeply interested in, especially cardiologists.
Right.
And we should be studying this, and it should I'm sure it would greatly inform, right, our medical therapies.
Yes.
And therapeutics if we pursued that kind of research. And these are things that have been known for thousands of years, right? That energy is a really important part of human health. I mean, the Chinese and the Indians have known this for more than 5,000 years.
Millennia. Back to that was the running theory of the greats, Aristotle. Mm-hmm. It's so nice to be able to talk to you so freely, and somebody that really knows a lot more of functional medicine than I do, and that practices it and is willing to go up like you have. Ultimately, I believe that our system is such a failure that I think that our entire health care system needs to be broken into a million pieces, and we need to start over because it's just so corrupt. There's an author that wrote a book that my older brother Ken really turned me on to. It's called Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein. And I understand she's a progressive liberal, but and that's okay. But so much of the stuff that she wrote in that book was so right. We as physicians have completely we have destroyed all of the other millennia-long healing traditions, and we have thrown it out for corporate profits. And just all coming back full circle. That's the whole system engages only on profit, and it's not the way our bodies were meant to be treated.
Yeah, I've wondered myself, like, how do we combat this? The takeover of medicine, and like you said, it's been maybe 100 years, right?
Yes.
That we've had this takeover of medicine by, um, I mean, who was it? It was one of these billionaires, right?
Yeah,
In the 20s,
Rockefeller,
Rockefeller, right? Yeah.
Rothschilds, and completely what they come
The med
in.
schools are in their pockets, the government's in their pocket, the industry's in their pocket. I mean, it's all, like you said, exactly the RICO. It's collusion of not just the government and pharma, but also med schools, nutritional schools. Everything, everyone is colluding together.
Right. And then you raise me up in medical school, and then I believe all this nonsense, and I get married to it, like gosh, I read it in the New England Journal of Medicine, I learned it in medical school. Of course, it's got to be true. And I was so stupid and so far off the truth that I was lost in the system.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, the really important thing also is to understand how people wake up from it, and can we kind of systematize that so that we can wake up more people? Is there
Yes.
some program that we can put together for, like they say, red pilling? Can we red pill doctors on a massive scale? Like, how would that work? What was it for you, and what do you think can help other people to wake up to what's going on?
That's a great question. I think that's a great question, and I want to credit my most rebellious child, my oldest daughter, and my most rebellious brother, my older brother Ken. And I don't think they'll mind me calling them out, but the simple fact of the matter is that I thought that I was so right, and so ingrained into the academic system, and look at me, okay. I know how to do these statistics, and I know how to publish a paper in the American Journal of OBGYN or any other mainstream medical journal. And I just started so much believing in this stuff. And I told them, that they were both, that they were both crazy, and, slandered them, to their faces, like siblings and fathers do and daughters do. And and finally, it just, like, after understanding and learning more, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm dead wrong. I've been living in a lie. This is wrong. My oldest daughter, Jenica, I mean, she was dead right, regardless of any of her other, issues that she has. And my older brother, was dead right, and I was wrong. And it was very liberating for me to apologize to them and seek the truth. I don't know how, ultimately, my Creator gave me the wisdom to see through my errors. I don't know. But I get a tremendous amount. I think you're doing your job, what your Creator created you to do. I see it in your spirit. I see it in your demeanor. I see it in your knowledge and your wisdom. People like the rest of us that are doing what you're doing, this is all we can do. People that I try to speak to, and all they can do is call me names and ad hominem attacks. I can't really help them. But, it's people like you, Dr. Hyder. It's people like, my brother, my oldest daughter, it's people like Peter McCullough that go out there and just stump day after day after day. You're the people that motivate me to just stay on this path. Peter McCullough is he's such a hero. And I could name 100 other doctors, Dr. Ben Marble, Dr. Viglione in her own right, Dr. Ken Thorpe, there's, Steve Kirsch. He's not a physician, but oh my gosh, I have so much respect for him, because here's a guy that was a progressive liberal, a billionaire, and owned this country. He developed, he's a hero of its own right, MIT, PhD, whatever, gazillionaire, billionaire. He developed the optical mouse. and he up and got vaccinated, and we're yelling at people for not getting vaccinated, and he got his eyes opened. I mean, there's no better testimony to a true, intellectually honest person than you or Steve Kirsch or Peter McCullough. Peter McCullough has turned me on to. He got me involved with a group nationwide and the Health Defense Fund, and do a shout out. He got me involved with this menstrual irregularity and abnormalities that are just skyrocketed last year. And there's a lady that developed, she's a CEO and founder. Her name is a shout out to Tiffany Parotto, Parotto. And Dr. Peter McCullough was kind enough to ask me to get involved with that group, and I did. And oh my gosh, it's people all over the country. I mean, these are from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the southern border to the northern border. 12 of us have come together, 15 of us, and just focused on that. And it's an incredible story. And we just published our first paper, and Tiffany Parotto, who I'm so proud of, was first author on that paper, and two more papers to follow on the whole menstrual cycle story. It's people like this that, I've lost a lot of family and friends because of the division. But I speak with somebody like you, that I have immense respect for, or the people that connected us, Amy Shafford, who is just dying the wool truther, who'd give up anything to see the truth. That's my new family. That's, I've lost a lot of family and friends and colleagues, but I have a new family that seek the truth and don't care about the consequences.
Yeah, talking about the menstrual irregularities just reminded me to ask you, how worried are you about the future of the human race and the fertility of women and their children, who were exposed to vaccines in the womb or afterwards?
I'm very concerned, and this is stuff that should have been, this should have been investigated. I get really angry if these academicians who say, menstrual irregularities, they've been around for a long time, it's no big deal. No, you're missing the point. This is a huge big deal. We knew in 2012 that the lipid nanoparticles concentrate in the ovary. The lipid nanoparticles have PEG in them. They have a very poisonous pseudouridine artificial mRNA in it. It does get incorporated, and it gets concentrated in the ovaries. And I just remind, I know you know this, but I don't think many doctors, and your audience probably doesn't know it, that with every ejaculation, a man deposits 150 million gametes, right? Well, with a woman, and we do that our whole life, but with a woman, that's not the case. A woman is, by the time she's 10 weeks before she's born, she's got all the gametes, all the ovum she'll ever have for her entire life. And every single one of those gametes, those ovum, are exposed to high concentrations of lipid nanoparticles. And why didn't they do their due diligence? This was proven in 2012, yet the American Board of OBGYN says it's safe and pushes the vaccination. So, could it wipe out the human race? Yes, it could. Nobody knows because the research hasn't been done.
So you said that it was proven in 2012. Was that something to do with the lipid nanoparticles going to the ovaries?
Yes. There's a paper out of 2012 that clearly demonstrated that the lipid nanoparticles accumulate in the ovaries. And then there's the Worcester rat and the mice model, which is in the Pfizer load, the Pfizer FOIA. They knew it.
So do you think it's possible to really fully detox ever from a vaccination like this, where the lipid nanoparticles have gone everywhere? Do you think, there's long COVID and vaccine injuries are very similar, but the difference is that you've got lipid nanoparticles and you've got the pseudouridine and, this mRNA that's an artificial mRNA. And there's evidence showing that it sticks around. That mRNA doesn't degrade in a couple of days or a few hours or whatever, as it is expected to. It stays around for weeks, and we don't really know how long. right? Well, why is it lasting that long and staying around that long? And so how long can it last? That's the question. And the other question is, what happens to the lipid nanoparticles? Do you ever get rid of them, or is it just inflammation, you know, being caused by them in the organs that they went to for the rest of your life? I mean, what's is there anything that you've come across or that you can think of that would help people? Because there's three things that I see with the COVID vaccines. It's first of all, it's the lipid nanoparticles, and second of all, the pseudouridine and the mRNA, and then third is the spike protein, right? So
That's right.
we have ways of dealing with the spike protein, but the other two we don't really know what to do with.
And Dr. Hyder, to your point, I wish that I could offer some more information to you and to our viewers, but the simple fact of the matter is I can't, because nobody knows. It's an unknown. This is the stuff that should have been done before we rolled this vaccination out. But I have so many vaccine injured pregnant moms, so many vaccine permanently injured and dead fetuses, and so many vaccine injured offspring. It's really, really horrible. The women, a significant percentage of the moms that get the vaccine in pregnancy, these kids have VAIDS. It's VAIDS. It's vaccine-induced acquired immunodeficiency syndrome.
How does that present in the children?
It presents as they're chronically sick. Their immune system is destroyed, and so they're chronically ill. They can't mount a humoral or a cellular immune response, and their doctors say, "Oh, it has nothing to do with the vaccine." Well, yes, it does. I know people. Okay, I know people. I know babies that have had this, and they're constantly ill, and so it's a variation of VAIDS, and people not to get confused with HIV. Remember that you're too young to you probably weren't in practice because you're just a young man. In 79 and 80, 81, 82, 83, when the acquired immune deficiency syndrome was described, acquired immune deficiency syndrome can be caused by many, many different things. HIV, the virus, depending on how much you want to go down the rabbit hole, if it's real, it is one cause of it, but it's only one cause. So HIV is just one cause of acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and the vaccine is another cause. And the vaccine, whether it's given to a mom and pregnant or whether it's given to any adult, they have some form of VAIDS, which is either clinically significant or not significant.
And this was something that I was wondering about also, that when we're talking about vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, do you think that we're going to see the same AIDS-defining illnesses that we see with HIV/AIDS in patients with VAIDS?
We already have.
You have?
Yes. It's, you look at Dr. Ryan Cole, you got the bizarre cancers in the first year of life. That's
Right.
Exactly sarcosis. That's exactly
Kaposi's sarcoma. Yeah.
Exactly what we saw. So it's a whole potpourri of you've basically, what you've done, it all goes back to energy. You've taken all the energy at the cellular and immunological level, all the protein folding and misfolding, that's all energy dependent, Dr. Hyder. And that's why the water, and going back to Dr. Ken Thorpe's, our view of energetics, every single cell division requires a massive amount of energy just to unravel the DNA, because there's a small film of water that mediates all that transfer that allows that protein to fold correctly. And if it folds incorrectly, you're in deep doo-doo. Then you end up with plaques, and you end up with depositions and Alzheimer's, deposition, destruction of neurons. There's a whole variety of protein misfolding diseases, and so if all that energy is put into creating this fake narrow immune focus, then everything else is put at risk.
Yeah, that's just terrifying. I had another question here for you. I wanted to ask you, so in your practice, what you're actually seeing on the ground, do you have a significant number of patients who were not vaccinated so that you can compare the outcomes in both groups, and what percent, of the vaccinated patients are having different outcomes?
That's a great question, and I'm not allowed to formally investigate that at my institution. I've tried to, but it's you
Wow.
don't go there. But what I can tell you is that I would say that probably only about 30% of my pregnant women are vaccinated, and so they've become a lot wiser and a lot more weary
Mm.
of vaccination now. I am working with some folks in some of the more progressive liberal areas, and I network with them, and including sonographers, and I that are in highly vaccinated areas, and I'm putting together a coalition. I have a sonographer that is, only about, say 10 years my junior, that is just unbelievably experienced and sees a massive amount of it. And this particular sonographer can actually confidently discriminate between not only a vaccinated and unvaccinated, but can discriminate between the Pfizer versus the Moderna vaccination in the placental ultrasound.
Wow. I mean, that's just shocking. Are you serious?
Yeah. Now,
I can't even believe that. It's hard to believe.
it is hard to believe, and I'm not going to make any wild statements or anything
Are
like
they going
that.
to publish something on this? Are they going to
That's
come
what
out
I'm
and talk
trying
about
to.
it?
I want to. I
That's
want.
terrifying, actually. I mean, it's not just shocking, it's terrifying that you would have. I mean, you're talking about physical changes in the placenta from
And she
vaccination.
can date it. She can date it. She'll say, "Okay, so you got the Moderna vaccination 8 weeks ago, right?
So
How did you?"
what's the physical change that she's seeing? Has she told you?
Yes, yeah, and I'm in the process of evaluating it, and I don't really want to. I can't vouch for the veracity of this. I'm just intrigued,
Mm.
but the specific. And I don't even want to go into what she's seeing and what she's not seeing, because she's in a very, very precarious situation with a group of my colleagues elsewhere in the country that have enormous amount of respect for her, but she's come up against them, and so I don't. I want to be very sensitive to her, but with my sonographer group, I have a lot of sonographers, and I want to initiate a better study of this, and that's what I'm in the process of doing.
So the changes, I mean, can you tell us whether you're worried about the physical changes that are being seen? Do you think that the physical changes themselves could have an effect on the pregnancy and the fetus? I mean, in terms of blood flow or anything at all?
It definitely does, because it's a macro change that is pretty prevalent. So I'm not so much concerned about the actual specific changes that could be
Hmm.
unique to the Moderna versus the
Hmm.
Pfizer, but what I'm more concerned about is, okay, all of the other underlying damage and effect that it has on the fetus. If there's a physical effect that can be detected by looking at a placenta by ultrasound, then that that's of concern.
It's really terrifying. I mean, I can't express how shocked and dismayed I am that there are physical changes present, in the placenta. And if they're in the placenta, then you would imagine that, there we knew that there was microscopic damage happening, obviously, because when you get vaccinated, cells. What we know now is that the lipid nanoparticles are going everywhere, not just into the deltoid muscle. So cells everywhere in your body are expressing the spike protein on their surface, including blood cells, blood vessel cells, and so those cells are being targeted by your, T cells and destroyed because they're abnormal. They're presenting this abnormal foreign protein on their surface, and this was, I mean, we knew this would happen. It's not, unusual, but what we didn't know, or at least we weren't told. We weren't told to expect this. Was that it would be happening everywhere? It would be happening in your blood vessels, in your heart, in your brain, in your ovaries, in the placenta, in the baby. Inside the placenta, they would pass into the fetus. And so you're having, for example, the linings of the cells that line your blood vessels. If they present the spike protein on their surface, T cells come and destroy them, right? So then you can imagine, what's going to happen then. You're going to have clotting, obviously, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and with the placenta, I mean, it's such a vascular organ, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just and it needs to be vascular. I mean, there's all the oxygen exchanges happening between the mother and the baby, right? And so then you start worrying that is there going to be fetal oxygen deprivation going on because the placenta is not fully vascularized? I mean, just the implications here are really, really, really concerning.
Very concerning, and they should have been vetted before.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that really upsets me, that
Me
they
too.
knew, like you said, in 2012, that these things would go to the ovaries. So how could they skip the genotox and the reproductive toxicity studies? I mean, how could they do that? So the reproductive toxicity studies based on the fact that it goes to the ovaries, and then the genotox studies just based on the fact that theoretically it could retrointegrate into your DNA.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's some percentage of people, if you vaccinate billions, we do have um, you know we do have the enzymes in our cells that could do that. And then if you're talking about germ cells, right, this could be passed on. The
That's exactly right. And in the Pfizer dump, what I've realized too is that that the former vice president of Pfizer, um, and what's his name, Michael Yeadon, and there was an article that the Epoch Times. There's and a young reporter there. His name is Enrico. I won't mention his last name, but he's a brilliant guy. And he put together an article that was published in Epoch Times, I think last week, and it was based upon an interview with me and with Dr. Michael Yeadon. And am I saying his name right? The former vice president.
yeah, Mike Eden. Yep.
And the statements that he makes are just unbelievably concerning. And it's I don't know Dr. Michael Yeadon, but again, to me he's like a Steve Kirsch. If he can do an about face and say, I was dead wrong and I was involved, and then spill all this stuff, he'll readily admit that they knew back in 2012 that it was it was definitely concentrated in the ovaries. And then he also, is strongly adamant about that they knew that it was permanently incorporated into the host genome. And that's what they lied about. And we have proof now that is it in every cell? We don't know that, or we don't know that it's in every cell. I doubt whether it's in every cell, but there are certain cells where the DNA has been permanently altered by the pseudouridine reverse transcriptase of the mRNA, and it's incorporated in there permanently. Germ cells, don't know.
And the important thing would be, can it be expressed again, right?
That's
I mean, I'm sitting here shocked, right? Like, if people could see my face, I didn't even realize that we had proven that it was being retrointegrated. I think they did a study in liver cells or something. They did a study in
yes.
vitro. Are you saying like in human beings, like in actual people, they've shown that it
Um,
retrointegrates?
I think that what came out in the Pfizer dump was animal studies. I don't think
I
we've
see.
proven that in
Oh,
humans.
I didn't realize that was in one of the Pfizer dumps. So they knew that it would definitely, it would be possible to retrointegrate. And the next question is, once you know that, is it possible that it gets expressed again? And is that maybe the reason that we're seeing people with persistent long COVID, and it just um, and persistent, spike protein, and persistence of the mRNA, that, I mean, eventually the pseudouridine, or the mRNA that's produced from the vaccines, should eventually degrade. I mean, it can't stay forever. I would imagine. I mean, the pseudouridine strengthened it, but as far as I understand it, it can't stay around forever.
Well,
So
the RNA will be degraded rapidly, but if it's reverse
if
transcribed,
it's reverse transcribed, yes, if it's reverse transcribed, then certainly if it's expressed again, then that could explain why you're still seeing it, months later. From my understanding, I mean, I have to cast my mind back to genetics, but so like the uridine is present in RNA, but not in DNA, right?
that's correct.
ATCG, right?
Yeah,
So if you retrointegrated, you wouldn't retrointegrate the uridine. That would be missing. So
correct.
if it transcribed again from DNA back into regular RNA, it should be regular uridine at that point.
One would expect that. That's correct. I think that you're right on that, but I can't vouch for the veracity of that. But I think you're right. I mean, what is your take, Dr. Hyder, about, we talked about the three things. Well, is it the vaccine? Okay. Is it the COVID-19, or is it not a COVID-19, just spike protein exposure? What's your take on just, for example, spike protein exposure without a coronavirus infection, without a COVID-19 infection, or without the vaccine?
So are you talking about the possibility of people shedding spike protein?
Shedding, and then people passively acquiring it and getting sick. What are your thoughts on that?
So a lot of people have told me that this is happening to them, and it seems to me that it's a possibility. It's something that could happen. I would expect it to be shed in your sweat, when you breathe, I'd expect you to be breathing it out. And since it is so toxic, and it causes such a severe, like basically an allergic reaction in a lot of people, you don't really need to be exposed to a whole lot of something like that to have a reaction to it. And so people have, they come to me and they say that it's really temporarily linked to being around people who are vaccinated. Like you mentioned, Amy Schaefer, who brought us together. When she travels, she feels sick, and she'll have she won't feel normal, and then she gets better as soon as she's out of the airport and away from the airplanes. And so hearing it from so many people, it's one of two things: either there's something real, or it's something that they're imagining, right? Like a psychosomatic disorder, and it could be either one. So I think we need to do some study on it. We need to look into it, and somebody needs to study it. Just like anything, it's a great theory, and but my suspicion is that there really is something there, because usually physicians in the modern world, Western physicians, when they talk to a patient and they can't imagine that there's any mechanism for them to have the symptoms that they're having, they just write it off. They blow it off and they say it's all in your head. And so we should never do that with anyone, right? We should
That's right.
always take them at their word and assume that what's happening to them is real until we can really prove it otherwise. And at what point can you really prove it otherwise? Because we're always limited, So when people go to the doctor with long COVID, for example, the doctor runs every test they can think of, and since they don't find anything on all the tests that they have available to them, they say it doesn't exist. And that's a fallacy, right?
You're right.
It's just you can't you can't see what's wrong with them. You don't have the test that'll show it. But if they go to IncelDX, they have a test that shows it, and they've done the research and they've shown that it's linked to those symptoms. When you have this test result, it's linked to those symptoms. So a lot of times I think we have to be humble about the limitation of our knowledge and give patients the benefit of the doubt. I think we should always give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, we've gone way over time now. I don't want
been really fun.
to wear out the welcome, but yeah, it really was. This was a lot more enjoyable than the first interview. And there's so many different topics that we could talk about. Actually, I look forward to hopefully talking again soon in the future.
We will, and Amy will give you my cell phone, and maybe you can give her your cell
Mm-hmm.
phone, and
Yeah.
maybe we can have just keep in better touch, because I really, really appreciate you. And I really think I'm really just, you really are motivating me to keep up the fight.
Yeah, great. I mean, I would love to be in touch and just I want you to update me, on the latest, coming out of your collaborations.
I
It just
will.
sounds like you're doing so many tremendous things in the background here. You need a website with, the latest from James Thorpe and family, it sounds like.
Keep on keep on the check out Tiffany Parato in the mycyclestory.com. That was just published, and I think you will be fascinated with that. And it was a collaborative effort, but she's the and we got a couple more coming out on that. And it ties in with what we just spoke about, because we believe, I've heard so many stories, and so many that unvaccinated, that just coming in the presence of the shedders are having massive dystopian menstrual irregularities. So I'll keep you posted on that. But
Is
thank you
that
so much.
mycyclestory.com?
Yes, it is
Yeah.
mycyclestory.com. That's Tiffany Parato.
Okay,
She's
great.
an up and coming rock star, and I'd love for you to connect her up with you, because I mean, she's a dynamic young woman that I have all the expectations of really helping change the things in women's healthcare right now around this COVID tragedy.
Great. So tell us again where patients can reach out to you. There was an email address, right? If people want to
Yes,
get in touch with you.
yes, please. It's J as in my first name, A as in my middle name, and my last name, Thorp, no E on the Thorpe. And then it's at bellsouth.net.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat. So if anyone
Please.
has any further questions for you,
Yeah.
thank you again so much, and I look
Well,
forward to talking again.
thanks
This
for
was
hosting me for
fantastic,
so long. It's been a blast.
tremendous.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.